Welcome to Brad's Questions, title to be determined. Got Eric Navarro here. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, sure thing.
Can we call it in the interim with this podcast, before it has a name, can we call it TB Brad?
TB Brad, yeah. So what have you been up to lately? What's new this week?
This week's been pretty good. I got my press pass for Warped Tour, which is unexpected and awesome. I think that's it. I changed a lot of diapers, and that's stupid.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't do that. But no, yeah, I got my press pass for Warped Tour, which was really cool. And then I published an article on Friday that got a lot of traction about how to build your band. So that's pretty sweet.
So what are you doing with that press pass? Are you just going to be running around trying to interview different people, or are you setting up things in advance?
So I got a couple of emails from some bands on like reasonably sized labels, like usually the mid-level bands, like none of them, not the main stage, but also, whatever whatever. So a couple of those are set up, but I guess I've talked to a few people who've done press before for Warped Tour, and they say it's kind of like there's a press area. I'm assuming it's like a little pen or something, and then you go in there. You can either set up a time to meet a band, or the band's publicist will give at each day of the venue, if they want to be interviewed, they'll give a time period that the band is going to have to go to the press area. So you just kind of like you sign up, and you hope that they let you interview the band. So you just sign up and show up at the time, and the band's just like there hanging out.
But that's just for bands who have publicists. I assume most bands on Warped Tour do not have publicists.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I actually don't know how it works for the smaller bands. I keep people keep telling me to interview. It's because the Maryland date. There's some Maryland bands that aren't on a main stage, but happen to be playing the tour for stretches and sometimes the entire full tour. And I'm not sure exactly, so I just call them. Just be like, can you meet me here at some point? You have my number.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think just any band can do it. Dude, okay, so my band Heavyweights is also playing the Ernie Ball stage, but the access you get for Ernie Ball stage, if you win the Battle of the Bands, you get free pass in, and you get a stage pass that only basically allows you entrance in and out of the venue, but also can let you go back to the Ernie Ball stage. I guess it lets you into that back area, but nowhere else.
Okay.
Nowhere else at all. And I think that includes the press area. I mean, because and so I was like, what if I can't even, my own band doesn't even have access to go into the press area?
Yeah. Well, they need a publicist apparently, right?
We do. We had a PR person for a while, but they were like, cost money. So that burnt out after 4 months, I think.
Right. Well, that's cool, man. That's awesome for the band and for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is awesome for me. Thank you.
So some of our listeners may recognize you from the Eric Tries Too Hard podcast, I assume.
Some of them might.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that for, I guess I started recording in very early 2000, was it 15? 14. And I started putting them out about, 11, 12 months ago. 13, 14 months ago.
Yeah.
That difference is huge. It's probably like 4 episodes, knowing the frequency that I posted them at the start of this podcast. But yeah, a little over a year.
How long? And so I feel like podcasts are gradually getting more and more popular these days. How long had you been listening to podcasts before you decided it was time for you to do one?
It was before I decided, like 2 minutes. I was like, I could do this, but it took a couple years. It was weird. I had an iPod and iTunes in 2004, when I guess that's when it came out. Around that time, maybe a year in. But I didn't know anybody else who had an iPod or an iTunes or a Mac computer for that matter. That was pretty. That was definitely not the norm. But so I'm such a hipster. Oh my god. I don't know. So I had those things, and I knew what podcasts were. But for whatever reason, it either didn't interest me, or the only ones I saw. I think I browsed through one day, and they were all from just NPR shows.
Yeah.
I was like, this isn't for me. And it took until I guess I've always gotten in and out of comedy throughout my life.
Right.
And I'll just go so heavy into it. I'll know like every tour, every working comic that I can get my hands on, I'll probably know. But then stretches of years will go by and I'll just not lose interest, but I don't have the same passion for it. And I started to get that passion back around like 2012, which is when I had started my first like real out of grad school job, and I had a pretty long commute. And so I guess early 2013, I started. I was like, oh, this comic I like has a podcast. Oh, let me check that out. And then it would be like I'd hear about another podcast from the initial podcast, and then it would just all splinter off to the point where it got me like completely back into comedy, back into podcasting in general.
So it wasn't as much like, oh, I love podcasts. It was, I love this comic. I want to absorb everything he does.
Yes.
And so now I like podcasts too, because these comics I like also do that.
Yeah, that got me into the medium. Yeah. And that definitely got. I mean, you know me personally. I love DVD commentaries.
Right.
Those were, oh my god. And my favorites were always like Judd Apatow ones, where they ended up just talking and
just hanging out.
Yeah. I was like, hey, listen to this all day. This is like another.
Hey, let's watch this movie we made and just shoot the shit.
Yep, exactly. That's why I always whenever I check to see commentary, I'm such a nerd. I feel like, oh my god, it's like the whole other movie. Like it's another movie. It's two movies. But like no, and so that's basically what podcasting is. Whether it's one guy talking to himself like Bill Burr, interviewers like Mark Maron and Pete Holmes. Either Mark Maron's never going to ever know who I am, but I love that's my go-to saying because he would hate it so much.
Right.
Or if it's like a group podcast like I call or like Bobby Kelly's podcast. But like you could even go back and trace that to radio shows like Opie and Anthony, and you could trace that back, or not trace that back, but like another parallel would be like Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn on Comedy Central. And I feel like those two shows were kind of the basis for all of the comedy podcasting that we have today. I think you can absolutely thank those shows for that. It's kind of incredible to see like things that I don't know I did really, really well in the early 2000s just lead to this whole like spectrum of media.
I know you're a big Tough Crowd fan.
I thought you were gonna say I was a big tough guy, but that's not right. Yeah.
No.
Yes, big Tough Crowd fan.
Is there a style you like more? Do you like the group podcast better, or like the interview, or the solo, just one man talking?
Yeah. It definitely changed. It was, and I totally copied it with whatever podcast I was doing. But like, I really initially liked. I guess maybe. I think the first ones I listened to they all had like a theme. I'm even forgetting what they were, to be completely honest. It was like there were 2 or 3
like a content theme.
Yeah. And those I kind of just like, they didn't hook me the same way the other ones do. Like, cause then I quickly got into, I mean, I love the Bill Burr talking to himself. But man, like, I don't know who else could do that.
Right.
Like,
it definitely takes like a certain type of person to be able to do that.
So it's hard. Yeah. And his comedic voice kind of fits the medium perfectly. And he's also found really innovative ways to use the medium, even content wise. But yeah, like, so I can't tell if it's that I like the style or if I just like him doing it. But at this point, I started out liking the interviews a lot more, but I feel like some combination of already like getting to know pretty much every comic I could ever want to get to know. I noticed that eventually, even though everybody's like famous and has interesting lives and interesting stories for the most part, the same themes keep coming up in a lot of podcasts. And so I'll have to even like just find another comic who does interviews sometimes. I don't know. And at this point, I think I really, really like just the group of people talking. Like I think that's kind of where I've really found an enjoyment of podcasts. Because I don't know, it's like it combines my favorite things about like improv things about comedy, like improv and not having a direction really, or I don't know, a lot of spontaneity stuff that I really like.
Is it more for like getting just like those insider stories coming up that you're looking for, or more like breaking down deeper issues that they'll come across as they are just like talking about whatever.
It's weird. I like hearing stories about how stuff like got made.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a big part. Just even the little like tidbits of like, I don't know, like on 40-Year-Old Virgin commentary, Judd, I don't know, it's not a podcast, but in the commentary, Judd Apatow is always pointing out like, oh, here's the joke that I had wrote in the script, and here's how it turned into what you see on the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I also like stories, like anytime somebody has, but it's weird. It's never when someone tells a story about themselves, it's fine. But I love when people I could listen to people tell stories about Patrice O'Neal or like all day. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, sorry. What was it? Of course, it's ADD Eric, so I got lost in my own thought.
But more so that than like trying to uncover any deep issues or something. Like I know my inclination would be like with your psychology interest too. Yeah. You want to dig down deep to these issues that are underneath.
Kind of. I don't know. It's like as far as diagnosing and thinking of treatments for these people, I just enjoy my comedians. I can't that part of my brain shuts off. But I don't even like hearing about psychology because a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. But like they kind of, even the best ones tend to just dance around an actual accurate statement. And it's like they're so close to how, especially when like a lot of comics who see therapists, they bring stuff that their therapist said. So they're hearing something like second or third hand off of a lot of times a therapist who got their license, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when the treatment methods were vastly different and entire schools of like the primary school of thought in psychology has changed since then. And so like, you can often find like really either outdated information or just kind of like, here's a good example. When Whitney Cummings was on, I want to say, it was probably Mark Maron, but it might've been Pete Holmes. I'm having a hard time picturing her on Pete Holmes' podcast, but like she would, I think it was with Maron, and she was saying how she goes to therapy all the time, and she was describing this type of treatment for anxiety. I forget what she was saying. It treats a couple of things, and she was like, "It's incredible. It's this thing where when talk therapy doesn't work, you get this. It's called rapid eye movement therapy, and then they do the talk therapy, and they do the exposure stuff. But they do it all while they're tracking your eye, and it's like some psychologist discovered, oh, all we have to do is track your eye, and that's what fixes it. And it's like, no, that was a marketing gimmick because everybody knew exposure, but people wouldn't do it. And so this one dude was like, okay, well, what if I pretend it has something to do with your eye? And then it worked really well. So well, in fact, that for a while became like the pop culture golden standard of, oh, that's how we treat this thing. It's like, no, that's like, it's, and so it's like, no, you got it. You're so close, but it's not exactly. So that drives me absolutely crazy. I feel like I should have a Mystery Science Theater podcast where like, but it's like me listening to podcasts and just inserting my jokes and my and my thoughts on the subject.
Your ideal is just doing commentary on DVD commentary of DVDs.
It is. You know what? If can I be like the for closing in on 30 adults, the PewDiePie of that? Just me sitting here and like. Yeah, me talking about listening to commentary on DVDs that came out.
Right. So you mentioned the stark differences, or you kind of dance around it, the differences between Maron's podcast and Pete Holmes' podcast. Both interview style, right?
Yeah.
What?
Well, I feel like Pete Holmes is, or Mark Maron is. Pete Holmes is Mark Maron if Mark Maron just like. Got successful.
Got over it.
Yep, that's it. And I think that's why there's that. I know they're like friends, but they shit on each other. Like, I think that it's just so interesting because they cover a lot of the same topics. They interview in a lot of the same style. Well, Marin's is more chronological. Pete Holmes is more subject based. And like, but with the exception of that, they kind of using two different angles. They like Mark Maron being, hey, you can be comfortable talking about your neuroses here because they're just falling out of my pockets. But like Pete Holmes is very much he's so curious and interested in the other person. It's like a selfless extroverted way of doing it versus a selfish introverted way of doing it. But for whatever reason, they're able to get out the same kind of information and lower people's defenses to kind of talk about whatever. And at this point, I mean, if you go on either podcast, you know you're going to be talking about some stuff. So a perpetual motion machine is already happening. But
so kind of the curious optimist versus the cynical pessimist.
Yeah, it's like Marin he takes pleasure in digging up painful things. Because you can like even in his voice, I don't think it's malicious or anything. I just think that might be part. But like when he starts really getting into like the nitty gritty of something, and the person's just talking about, I mean, his tone of voice, he's never uncomfortable. It's like natural to him to ask why to like the most personal of questions. But he also like, you can hear the smile in his voice as he starts getting into like really fucked up shit. And I think part of it is because he's happy to get the honest moment and he's comfortable swimming in that area.
Yeah.
But it just sounds, if you take it out of context in your head, it sounds very just like, yeah, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's just like his way of connecting with people is like, oh, you have these problems. I have these problems. Everybody's messed up.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I know you've been a fan of stand-up for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Your fandom of commentary is kind of coming out and doing these podcasts, I feel like.
Yeah.
When is your fandom of stand-up going to come out?
Are you saying that I have
to this point?
Are you basically asking me why all of my jokes have bombed on my podcast? Hey, why haven't I laughed at anything you said? Boy,
yeah. When are you going to start being funny?
That's serious, real. To the hard hitting journalism.
Yeah. Because I know like you're a huge fan of music, so you started a band. Like you had that passion. You were a huge fan of podcasts, so you started a podcast. You're a huge fan of stand-up. Where's the stand-up?
I'm gonna get on stage one day just to do it. And I'm afraid I'll like it too much. Otherwise, I just do it like this week. Dead serious. Like that could just be a cop out deep down. But I really feel like if I enjoy it so much, then that'll be a problem because I can't do that right now. So I might as well just like wait to try it. Sorry, I've set my alarm because I assumed that you would be late. I don't know why.
Thank you.
You're actually on time. But I forgot to unsnooze it. Yeah, like, but as far as comedy, like, I know that, I guess as 2 years ago, when I decided to do the podcast, had an inkling, I kind of just one night, I think it was towards the end of 2013, one night I kind of realized I want to be doing something creatively in the comedy field. That's all I knew. At first, I assumed, okay, that's got to be stand-up. I just got to keep writing jokes, and I'll work on it, and I'll start trying that. But as I started just online connecting with comics in the Baltimore area on Twitter and on Facebook, and I joined a couple of groups on Facebook and just started like meeting people, it didn't seem, I don't know, it didn't seem very welcoming. And it also, which, I mean, that shouldn't be the requirement. Like, you just do it. You have to earn respect. I always forget that. But like,
especially in that field.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it also, to be quite honest, everyone was just posting nonstop jokes, not bits or anything, and everything was so bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, this is also kind of weird. And then I also was like nervous to do it, so I waited and eventually I kind of was like, well, I'm in a band. I like talking to bands. I feel like I could do a podcast kind of like I like all these comedy podcasts. Why can't I make a podcast of a musician talking to other musicians, either somewhat humorous or loose or get down to like real issues? I of course I had dreams of being able to pull that Mark Maron stuff out of people. Like, like I'm trained in doing therapy, and I mean, you can do it after. I mean, well, that's the setting where people do it, so it's not like you're already kind of set up
Right.
to get people to tell you information.
They know what they're getting into there.
Exactly, but it doesn't even take like. But it's even then, it still takes a few sessions to like really ramp things up, and get to that kind of stuff. And sometimes it takes a lot longer, depending on the person. But like with the podcast, it's like I don't know. I had all these musicians on. And it was like, and they weren't very good at promoting themselves, which is it's a problem. But they also turns out musicians aren't inherently interesting. Like I know some funny musicians, but like your job doesn't have to be being interesting. But with a comedian, you kind of, at least in the facet of entertainment, you kind of have to be interesting. So after doing a bunch of musician podcasts, at first at my house, and then eventually just over the internet.
Yeah.
But I was doing these musicians, and it wasn't going as well, or it was going fine. I liked a lot of the people I had on, but there were a lot of people who just like didn't want to come on, or people who would come on, get excited about it, and then never post like the link or anything. That started bumming me out, and to keep on a consistent schedule. Oh, and bailing people. I'd have to reschedule constantly because people would just flake over and over again.
Yeah.
Eventually, I was like, well, just to keep it consistent, I want to have more podcasts. So I just started talking to myself, and usually, I thought those episodes went great if I had something to talk about that week. But like, if I did not, it was no good. And I felt like the last 5 or 6 that I did, I thought I really nailed. Because I kind of just built up things I always wanted to talk about and just let myself go on those. So I really liked those. But that was kind of the time, which was like December, January of 2014-15, when I was talking to my dad about the podcast. And I was like, I'm really excited about these like ones I've just been doing by myself. And he was kind of like, yeah, you're not going to get any new listeners if you're just doing that. Essentially, it's like you should just. It was more like, what you should do. Insert the exact opposite of everything we're doing. But this is really good advice, because he was just like, why you want to talk comics? Why don't you talk to comics? Like that's going to get more people on. And I was like, yeah, but I had all these musicians on who were like, they never shared the links. They were always flaking. And like when I tried to get comics on, I had one comic on, and everybody else kind of like had either flaked or wasn't interested. And he was like, well, wait, so you're asking like Baltimore bands, Baltimore comedians? I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, that's the problem. You're asking Baltimore, like it's not a slant against Baltimore, but let's a couple things are implied if you're a comic in Baltimore. One, you haven't moved somewhere else to do stand-up, which is usually like a sign that you've been doing it for a few years, or that you're very serious about it. That's a huge thing, that you're very serious about it. But also like even if you're a working comic in a smaller city that isn't like Chicago, New York, or LA, you may not necessarily take it as seriously as someone who does, whether they move there or that they just happen to live there, and you can go out so many more times like a night to do stand-up. And he was like, why don't you try to talk to some people who aren't necessarily from here, who've made those kind of decisions already. And so I posted on Reddit and then a couple of Facebook groups for stand-up comics. I host this thing on Google Hangouts. You can just do it from your house. I just wanted to someone interview you, make it kind of a conversation, just come on the podcast. And I had, lots and lots of people respond. So I started doing a few episodes. I had people flake, but it was okay because I was able to have a regularly scheduled, time to do it. And it was online. It wasn't too bad.
Right. Were you getting people from those bigger comedy cities like New York and LA, or were you getting people from all over?
At the very beginning, the first couple, I think through Reddit, I got a lot of like all over the place. I got a couple Minneapolis. I think I had a Pennsylvania, a Missouri, I think those are the states, probably a Florida tucked in there somewhere. But so I started getting those, and eventually, those kind of ran dry, and some of those people weren't very good at promoting the podcast either. And one of them even stole a joke I had on Twitter, and by joke I mean took a picture that I uploaded, took a screenshot of it, cropped it, uploaded it, and put my caption on there. And I was like, dude, at least give me a, I don't know, I guess it's something like at least give me a retweet. And he goes, oh man, I couldn't figure out how to retweet it.
Oh, come on.
I just, yeah, but you can figure out how to re-upload it as yours. Anyway, so like that eventually started to run dry, but it was still like the people who reached out to me, but like through Reddit, they were interested in it. They didn't care that I had only talked to one comic before. And in fact, 2 of them from Reddit were from Baltimore, which is kind of a cool coincidence. But like, so as I did more episodes, I started posting I posted again in the Baltimore like Facebook group, and like 2 people like responded, and turns out both of them are extremely like they care a lot and they're very hardworking. So I got fortunate there, and I think that's why they were interested in it. And once they kind of vouched for me, a couple more people, and at this point, I'd say like I've interviewed some very well-known Baltimore comics now, just because that snowball effect kind of happened.
Yeah. And
then when I post on other Facebook groups, that's when finally, after I had like 20 comics under my belt, that's when I found a lot of LA, New York, and Jersey, but and also like Chicago people contacted me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's part of the reason? Like, so your approach when you were getting bands at first, were you
people I knew,
just going to people you knew, right? And just like say, hey, be on my podcast. Do you think you would have gotten better podcasts out of bands if you had posted online trying to find those proactive band members who are like, yeah, I'll go on your podcast. Let me come on and talk to you.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. But I don't know if I would have gotten more interesting bands. Because like, okay, so I also do, not for the Eric Tries Too Hard like website, but I also do a panel podcast and I write articles for a site called babetalk.tv. And that one, the concept is it's a group panel podcast. It's our host Ollie, or if he can't do it, I'll host. And then 3 panel people from our staff, and then 1 guest from a band, or sometimes 2, usually. So for the most part, it's just 1 guest. But so the model that we do is we just talk about whatever. If the guest wants to talk, great. If the guest, it's actually kind of funny because the guests, like I know, the guests need a little bit of warming up. They need, and in group podcasts when they're not like everyone else knows each other. And I do it when we do group podcasts. The host has to address the new people at various times because they may not feel comfortable just jumping into this established relationship between all the other podcasters. And what's funny is sometimes I do notice it's like, oh shit, like we haven't even attempted to address the guest right now. Like they're just kind of been watching us like go back and forth. But yeah, so doing that was like, so doing that, so that model, like we'll just bullshit about whatever. And then it eventually turns into an interview about like halfway to 2/3 the way through. And I really like that model for talking to bands because but it requires like 4 decent podcasters to keep that banter going, as opposed to if it's me talking to 4 band members, like it's going to happen at Warped Tour, so we'll see. It's like your host is it's like 1 podcaster and then 4 people who all need to be addressed, and you need to bring everything out of them. Can be a lot easier that way to make a band, even if they're not particularly interesting, seem interesting, and it takes like 4 people. So I don't know.
So you think it's
I just say a band with no like stories. That's because a lot of bands who are willing to come on podcasts, like smaller ones, are the ones who they're still trying to make it. So it's not like Axl Rose is coming on Babe Talk and telling us. Yeah, most people don't have too much to talk about.
Do you think you're getting better podcasts out of just one band member then versus a group, the entire band?
I think so. Yeah. Sometimes like we've had this before where it's like 2 guys in the band who aren't the singer, and they share like a bench in front of the computer, because we all do that on Google Hangouts, and it's always that same thing. They never have their own seats, and it's never like, and we only get 2 usually when the singer's not there, and that's always good because then they get to banter with each other, and they kind of like I've noticed like every single time these bands misremember each other's stories, which is always fun to see. But like, yeah, so like but the one to get a band member to really like open up, it usually just requires like one, especially if it's like a one-on-one interview. Oh man, it's so much easier because like if it's multiple people in any social situation, they're going to be thinking, well, there's certain things I won't say because so-and-so is here.
Right.
And when it's one-on-one, not only is it a lot easier for people to forget, like just to get out of their heads the fact that they're being recorded, is also that nobody else is there for them to really go, if I tell this story, is someone else going to correct me and I'm going to look dumb? Am I allowed to talk about this subject? But those people aren't here, so yeah, of course I can.
Yeah.
And it can get them much more comfortable to that. If there's a second person, then both people seem more occupied with making themselves and each other look cool than actually having like an honest moment.
Yeah.
That I hate.
Have you gone on any podcast as a band member and not as yourself?
No, I've gone on, it's weird. Like we've done like video interviews. So I guess, I don't know. It's weird. It's like, yeah, we've done video interviews. So I guess it's like a heavily edited podcast. I don't know. But yeah, we've gone on to talk, but each time it's been like all five of us and then one or two interviewers.
But never just as like, hey, we have so-and-so from Heavyweights here.
I've done that on the radio. I think there was one time I called into a college radio station that played us and wanted to interview us. And holy shit, dude. I mean, you and I did college radio, and we were, not great or good, but like you were good at fades. You were a fucking fade. You're like, dude, I spent all week on this fade. Dude, aren't you on academic probation? Nah, dude, but seriously, this fade. I don't think you were ever on academic probation.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So these college DJs, like, they must have been, I don't know, I was about to say they must have been, 18 to 22. If I'd have to guess what age they were, I'd say college students were 18 to 22. But it was like they were trying to recreate like a hacky morning zoo, and not ironically. Yeah. So at first I'm talking to the guy who's like, but this guy voice, like, hey, you're on, hot 90 poop in the morning. And so there was that guy. There was the other like guy who only makes like snide, sarcastic, joking comments. Mm-hmm. So because I think heavyweights, or when it was like heavyweights, you boxing on stage, and then they had the third voice that chimed in, because this is not video, so I don't know who's in the room. They didn't tell me. So the third voice that chimes in is the strongly opinionated female voice. And well, I really think that like just bringing it back to a not a jokey context, and then making a snide comment at the very end, basically the Robin character. Right. And then of course at the very end, it's almost over. I didn't think this personality was in the room, but as we're signing off, the one guy was like, "Hey, this is the Cheese Monster here, and I've got my wacky question of the week." And they're like, and then ding, 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 wacky question of the week, the Cheese Monster. I was like, all right, so you've got a fake named personality that has a weird gimmick. Great. But yeah, so I only did that once. And
that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
No more Cheese Monsters.
I wasn't tired. It wasn't Cheese Monster. It was probably something funnier.
I like Cheese Monster, though. Cheese Monster is good. It's a good mental image to give to the listeners on the radio podcast or the radio show.
God. I wish if I could get a recording of that, I would love it. By the end, I started like punching back because they just, I didn't even clarify. They were just like shitting on me the whole time. I was like, why? Like, I guess that's their format. Yeah. Flush. That's what I want. I don't want the actual flush sound. I want like that voice with flush. Will represent the water.
So what's next for you? The podcast is going well, I guess.
I hope so. I suck at internet stuff, and for whatever reason, I don't have access to all of the data on the podcast.
Yeah.
But based on the limited metrics that we have, it's steadily gaining, very slowly, but steadily gaining regular listenership. But like, if being in this, business where you're trying to get fans of various, like, I don't know, pieces of entertainment, a diehard fan means so much more than like a casual fan. It's like, it's like you'd much rather have, you'd much rather have 100 people who love your band or your podcast or whatever it is and who devour everything you put out, than having 10,000 people casually checking it out from time to time. Because that's the people who are going to allow you to see a return financially or even like emotionally in the form of positive feedback.
Yeah.
It's going to be the hardcore fans. Like, that's it. Those are the people. Like, those are the
ones who are interacting.
Yeah. And then, yeah, exactly. And if you ever want to make a living out of what your art is, potentially keep doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to need somebody to spend some money at some point, or somebody to talk about you to all their friends all the time at some point. And eventually, hopefully, the right people will hear about that. But yeah, it's like, and those 10,000 casual fans aren't really gonna. That's cool. Like, I pop in to check out. Like, I'm a casual fan of a bunch of podcasts. I only listen to the episodes when the person they're interviewing is someone I'm interested in.
Right.
It's like, I like you guys as interviewers, but if it's not talking to somebody I'm already interested in, then I can't. Yeah. So like, those people don't see really anything from me. Maybe if it happens to be a comic on the podcast that I like, I would go see live, but has anything to do with the podcast. But like, you bet your ass, anytime I go to Amazon, I go through a link on like one of my favorite podcasts, like whatever it is, or I mean, since I started the podcast, I've worked in 2 different offices and at home, and I've talked to a bunch of bands. Yeah, I don't even have to mention the offices, like the bands I've talked to. The amount of stamps.com stuff that I've peddled off to people through various podcasts. Like, here's the link. I know it goes through this website. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I know it says WTF at the end of your link. That's fine. That's fine. It's not fake. But like, yeah, I definitely, will support those, those kind of whatever.
Right. And the band's going well. You're playing Warped Tour. That's nice.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I can't believe that. That's weird. We forgot to apply for it, and they gave it to us. It's
somehow fell into it.
Yeah, it's like when somebody gets like an actor with this huge, great past, but has never won an Oscar, gets an Oscar for some like middle of the road movie they made like towards the end of their life, and it's like, okay, well, we got to just give it to them. Yeah. Like, they worked so hard for so long. We have to just, I feel like somebody at Warped Tour was like, I feel like this band is like hit so many speed bumps and like given so little. They're probably about to break up. So I might as well just give this to them for all the hard work they did for the last 4 years trying to get on this fucking thing.
So is this, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because we only promoted the link once when it came up, and it was in a post where our singer said essentially, didn't even set this up. I guess they auto-renewed. Whatever.
Yeah.
Win.
Yeah. So is this like a shot of adrenaline then to the band?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I've noticed everybody seems a lot more like excited. I mean, we're excited, but it was like, we've got down a really great 25-minute set, like, which is something that I've always wanted to have a band do. 25-minute set. Okay. Like, a lot of bands, and I talk about this in my article on BabeTalk.tv that just came out. A lot of bands that
Plugs, by the way.
Yeah, right. Thank you. My hair is thinning. I have to get Patrick stumped that hair. But like, sorry, what was the question again? Damn it. So
the getting the Warped Tour spot being a shot of adrenaline to your band, like.
Yeah, well, so we got this really good 25-minute set down, and I've always wanted that because lots of local bands will, or even touring bands who don't have huge fan bases, will try to play like a unique set every single night. And I've known, and it's like nobody cares; they don't know the songs.
Right,
like,
they're not coming out for the deep cuts.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I put in my article. I think it said B-sides or something. Yeah, like nobody's coming out to your deep cuts, but like, so. The band Count to Four taught me this. They're like, what we do is we just have a 30-minute set that can last up to 30 minutes. We have all of our like best. Well, they didn't say this, but I assume they just put their best foot forward with the songs that they play best live, or the songs that people usually hear once and go, "Oh, I like that song." And they just practice those along with one of two rotating covers every tour. They just pick two covers, get really good at them, and then rotate them based on what the crowd wants. And so like hearing them talk about that model got me to go, oh, yeah, nobody gives a shit about whatever this other song is. And every once in a while someone will go, I'm bummed that you don't play this old song or this old song. There are only two old songs that people say that about. But like, they get bummed about it. But at the same time, it's like everybody else just wants to hear, like right now we've got a 7-song set. It's about like 22 minutes of music with enough time to like make it last to 30 minutes if we throw in like some intros and transitions, or it can be a good solid 25-minute set if we just play the songs with light banter. The songs bleed into each other at various points, where we kind of know where we differ from the CD. Everybody kind of knows what extra stuff they do, or like the little like cool things that you can do live that don't necessarily translate to a CD.
Yeah, you can kind of embellish a little bit show to show to make it to still make it interesting for you, but the structure of the set is laid out. Everybody knows what's happening next. Yeah.
If I'm feeling good about this, how you can tell I'm feeling good about the show. The more and more I go off script, is that like if I'm halfway through a melody riff, or a lead riff, I'm like, they get it, they know what's happening. I'll throw in some little like extra stuff, or sometimes change it completely. I know our rhythm guitarist Sean, he's been doing it more at practice. I don't think he improvises this at shows, but a lot of our songs, like he's really found ways to spice up the rhythm. And I would say it's mostly on old songs where the rhythms weren't as clearly defined. They were more just like chord, 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 chord. He's really started like tuning up second verses and bridges and adding like cool stuff. And it's so that's like. That's also why I'm excited to get the press pass for Warped Tour, because I also have a video press passes, which not everybody gets. Not a big deal. But like, but the person who's doing my videography, he doesn't give a shit. Dan Chiraki's wife is going to do like my videography.
Oh, cool.
I was like, does he want people knowing he's married? I think his sex symbol days are behind him. Me and Nikki once saw Guster. Well, we saw Guster a lot, but when we saw Guster once, their singer was like, yes, since two of us have had a kid in the last year, everyone cheers. And he was just like, I know I probably should admit that. I know what's kept this band going strong is the sexual tension between us and our fan base. But so she does that professionally. And so now we're also playing Warped Tour. And so she'll be able to have the pass to take video of like high quality video of our set.
Yeah, sweet.
And so that's going to be really, really awesome. I'm excited to have that. And with all the changes to the songs that we've made, like I really would love a high quality recording of us playing live. I think I really want to have that before, like if we end up getting rusty, because we don't play like 4 shows a month like we used to. So like,
do you think that'll pick up now?
And I hope not. Because we kind of realized last year we stopped doing the let's play every show we get offered, and we started doing like, okay, let's just do the big shows that we get offered, or let's set up our own big shows just a couple times a year. So we ended up playing probably like 16 to 20 shows. So it ended up being like 1.5 times a month, which worked out pretty well. And we also that year we took off a couple months to work on the record and to make a record.
Right.
So so anyway, and then this year, because I had between me having the baby and having to take a few months off, and we had a serious, financial, mental, emotional, effortful like push for our record last year. And while it did great for us, like it was amazing that we like all the stuff that we sold off of it and how well the release show did. But like a lot of the places we wanted to review our record didn't decline to do it. Some places did, and it was really cool. We got a lot of very positive reviews. But like it just didn't get, and we put a lot of money into the PR of it, and so it was like it didn't get where we wanted it to get, which was very unfortunate. And so we kind of were just like, all right, let's relax. Let's just play shows as they come, set up a couple of big shows. Same thing we did the previous year. But so we've kind of been playing, I think, once a month, and we had 1 month where we didn't have a show. And each of the shows has been like like really successful. We've been getting to play with a lot of really cool bands. I have to thank Casey Allen for some of those. There's this new booker in town who plays in another band who got on the Ernie Ball stage for Warped with us this year. He just started booking shows, and he's great at it. He's great at getting people out to shows, and he is like a band's first kind of guy. And it's like, and the guy goes above and beyond for everyone. And so anyway, got to give him a shout out for some of that. But like, we've been just getting to play with really cool bands. Every show that we've played has had, a fair amount of people there. It's now at the point where like, I don't usually look at the crowd while I'm playing because I need to look at my guitar. But like, whenever there's like a pause in the song and there's like lyrics, I can clearly hear a large portion of the crowd singing along, which is really cool. Even it's like a lot of times just people we don't even know, which is nice. And but yeah, so like that's it's definitely, I don't think any of us want it to pick up in that sense, but I do want us to be able to like to kind of be that band where we practice a lot more now, but we want to be that band who, when the bigger bands come to town, we're the local that opens up.
And like you could get the call, like it sounds like you have the set down enough where like you could get a call that afternoon, like, hey, this band dropped off tonight. Can you play a set?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, then that's the thing with yeah, exactly. And like, I feel like we're at that point where, as far as bands in Maryland in our slice of the genre pie, I feel like we've put in a lot of dues. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the live show we have now is good. The record that we put out last year, I finally listened to again after a long time, and I was like, I started laughing. I was like, people must really hate us because this is really good. Is
that motivation for next time then?
What, the next record?
Yeah.
I guess. I think this record still has a lot of legs.
Okay.
I think people didn't necessarily hear it as much. Granted, I don't want to pretend like, thousands upon thousands of plays and hundreds of downloads, and we sold over 100 records because we don't have any more. But like, so it did better than anything else I've ever done like that. But it was still just like, next time, I don't think it's going to be about. It's just going to be about the reputation that we have and word that's been spread about us, and that's all that we're going to be able to really base it on. There's no demand right now for us to have anything new. That said, I've given the band about 6 demos that I'm happy to start working on whenever.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I'm glad everything sounds like it's going pretty well for you.
Yeah, definitely. Doing this was a big leg up for me.
Good.
Doing the TVB.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, a pleasure.
And,
real pleasure.
A real pleasure. Any other plugs you want to get in?
Yeah. Let's see. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tries. You can go to, maybe when this comes out, erictriestoohard.com. And what else? Oh, and subscribe to the Eric Tries Too Hard, channel on YouTube.
Cool.
All right, sweet. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you later.
I'll see you later.
All right.